Hey, I'm Bob at I Like to Make Stuff. Today we're gonna make a basket for disc golf. If you've never played disc golf, it's exactly what it sounds like. You have these baskets on kind of a golf course and you throw a flying disc from hole to hole. It's a really inexpensive game to play, and the courses are often in public parks, so there's a lot of them. But I decided I wanted to make a practice basket to have in my backyard. Now this basket's not going to be mounted into the ground like most of them are. It'll be on feet so we can move it around. These baskets are not really that expensive to buy, but of course they do get more expensive the nicer ones you get. But I don't want to buy one, I want to make one because that's kind of what we do here. So here's the raw material that I want to start with. I've got some round steel bar, I've got some flat stock, I've got a conduit bender to bend this metal conduit, and those are going to act as the legs. And then to put the whole thing together, I've got this enameled black post. This is actually from the fencing section, and this is a post for a chain link fence. And then to wrap the whole thing together, we've got some other things out of that same section of the store, and these are all painted black. We'll end up painting all this the same. So I think we have enough to get rolling. Let's get to it. I'm going to use a metal cutting bandsaw to cut these, but you could use a hacksaw or an angle grinder. There's a bunch of different ways. This is just a quick and easy way to do a bunch at a time. Now that I've got all these pieces cut, I'm lining them all up against a straight edge, and then I'm going to transfer those marks that I made earlier across all of them at the same time. These marks are going to be where I'm going to bend these, because each one of these pieces has to be bent into kind of a hook. We're going to use these as the structure for the basket and for the top ring. To bend these, I'm going to use a Mat Pro torch. It burns hotter than propane, and it'll get this steel red hot enough to make a really nice bend. I'm going to bend it along those marks that I made by putting it in a vise. The first thing we're going to do is make the feet for this so we can stand the pole up and then work on it from there. And for the feet, I'm going to use this EMT conduit and bend it down using a conduit bender. So before that, I have to cut this into some sections, and I'm going to use a bandsaw for that. This thing's a conduit bender. It's a really simple, pretty inexpensive tool for bending this type of hollow conduit. Now I made a mark where I want the end of the straight piece to be. I'm going to feed that through here and line it up with the outside edge. Then you've got these markings along the side for different angles. That'll tell you how you can bend to get an angle that you need. We're going to go with 90 degrees, so now I'm going to lay it down and just pull on it. I've got all four of these pieces bent with the long side that's going to act as the foot on the ground. Now that I've got all four of these, I can slide them into this pipe and they just fit on the inside. And then as they go up and start to reach the curve, it gets a little bit wider so they get tight. Now that they're in there, I can just put some pressure down here and it's going to wedge itself onto these pieces on the curves. Now this is going to be outside on an uneven ground probably anyway, so it doesn't really matter if they're perfectly against the ground. If you needed this to stay in place, you could always put in some pins into the dirt to actually hold it down. But this is going to work out pretty well, I think. Now that I've got this pressed down on those feet all the way, I'm going to measure up from the ground 55 inches, which seems to be a standard height, and we'll cut this off at that line. The way this is going to work is these pieces are going to be attached to this center column coming out on the four sides, and then I'm going to connect those pieces with rings. To make those rings, we're going to use this. This is a ring roller, which means you can take stock like this, or flat stock, and make it into a ring from about 3 inches up to as big as you need it to be. In this case, we need about 26 inches, so we're gonna use multiple pieces and make half rings and then weld them together, then weld that ring onto these pieces and attach this to the column. To get the ring the right size though, I want to mount these to this post on the 4 sides, and then I can make the ring to fit those. I tried to use a hose clamp to hold these in place, and it was just too hard to manage all 4 of them. So I'm going to use some tape to hold each one in place in the right position, and then use a hose clamp to lock them together. The way this works is that you turn this knob and it raises and lowers this, which changes the gap here relative to the gap here, and then as you crank the piece through, it adds the bend to it. So the further bend you want, the more you have to crank this down. So you get a ring like this, and this one's a little bit too tight, but luckily we can bend it out. And I'm trying to make a semicircle with each one of these pieces, and then I'll make one for the other side, and we'll tack them together. Ideally, you would want to use one piece of steel, run it through the roller, and get a single ring that was the right circumference. But unfortunately, I didn't have any long enough, so I did 2 pieces that were half of the circle, and there's a little bit of an overlap. So I've laid those together and got them clamped up so it's roughly the same distance from here to here. And now that I've got that in the right shape, I'm going to tack these pieces together, and then I can kind of flex it a little bit to get it around those 4 points. It's not a perfect circle, but I do have it touching all 4 of these points, and I've tried my best to get these perpendicular to each other and parallel, but it's not perfect. That's okay in this case because this is for throwing a disc at. So I've got these in place, got them clamped on, and now I'm going to go tack these together, and it should lock all of this together into one piece. Now this is the basket, so this is going to get slid down further to the bottom section, but for right now, once I get these pieces together, the whole thing should slide as one unit. I went ahead and made the top ring that goes on here, and this is going to have chains hanging from it down to the center column. So to get those chains attached, we're going to use these quick links, and that means I have to drill several small holes all the way around here so that I can hook the chain through the link and then the link through the ring. Alright, that's all the holes. Now, if you do something like this, do it better than I did. I did not plan ahead. I went ahead and welded these pieces in place, but it's much easier to do the holes with a drill press, and you can either do that on the flat stock before you bend it, or even once you've got the ring, it'd be a lot easier to put that in the drill press, drill the holes, and just turn it. Either way, it works, and it's ready to go. Now that I've got all those drilled, I just have to deburr the outside of these holes and then get rid of all the oil that's on this. I'm going to clean it up so I can spray paint the whole thing with the black enamel that should last just fine outside. While we're waiting on the paint to dry, I'm going to go ahead and cut down the chain. I've got quite a bit of chain here, and I'm going to fold these pieces in half and then in half again, and then cut those into links, and then this will connect from the top outside loop to the inside of the column. I'm going to use a cutoff wheel to cut these down, but you could use a hacksaw or a Dremel or lots of different stuff. Now that the paint is dry, I've got this reattached to the post using some hose clamps, and that's so that I can take the entire thing apart if I want to store it away. But if you did want this to be a permanent fixture, you could grind off the paint and weld these pieces to it. Now that I've got this one in, let's put on the top and hang the chains. One of the advantages of using a fence post like this is that they make caps that go right on them and they're already painted. So that will keep water from going out of there. Next up, we're gonna attach these chains using the quick links, like I mentioned before. And these get hooked right into these holes, and then you tighten the link and it's good to go. So we're gonna do this all the way around and then attach them at the base. And then to get all these chains to the center column, we're gonna use another hose clamp that's a lot bigger and thread each one of these chains onto it and then wrap it around. This is gonna fall down all the way to the bottom, but it makes it so that we can take this apart just like everything else. So the chains are in place. If you throw a disc, they're gonna hit the chains and fall down into the basket, but right now, there's no real basket. So I've got a cargo net that we can cut down and fit around this basket, and that'll catch the discs as they fall, and that's how you know if you get points. The openings on this net are a little bit bigger than I would like, but it does catch it most of the time. You could always use a finer net if you wanted to make sure that it never fell through. Now that we've got it together, let's take it outside and try it out. I gotta say, this thing actually turned out better than I expected, and I know I say that a lot, but I really did kind of expect this thing to be top heavy and a little bit flimsy, but it's actually really sturdy and doesn't move around a lot when you hit it with one of the discs. I'm really glad that this thing can come apart though, because it is kind of a big bulky thing and I wouldn't want to have to store it in this state. One thing I didn't expect that I think is really cool is that the legs can actually twist and bend around the ground that you're on. So if you've got a little bump, you can just move the leg out of the way, or if you're on a hill, you can move two of them to adjust for the hill. I'd love to know what you think about this one, and mostly I would love to know if you learned something from this video. Please let us know down in the comments if you have. We've got a whole bunch of other project videos that you may want to check out, and if you're not subscribed, go ahead and do that as well. That's it for this one. Thanks for watching. See you next time. But I decided I want to make a All right, let's start. Let's get started.